Okay, so you may be wondering why I'm not in the weird getup that I'm usually am in. It's because I realized that I'm probably never gonna like get famous or anything, and that I don't really care if people know what I look like. Anyway, so that's about it. And now you may be also wondering why this isn't a gaming video because last time I said that I'd be covering more like real people until I get a better laptop. Well, I got the better laptop, but I don't really have any time anymore because I have a job now. I'm going to be preparing for college, so I don't really have time to do like heavily edited gaming content. So we're just going to be doing like real life people, maybe some drama here and there, just topics that I like to cover. So that's what that'll be. And then we have I might also be a little bit inconsistent because well, I'm going to be doing a lot of other things as well. And this is just a hobby for me. So the uploading may not be that consistent. I'm going to try and upload every Thursday, but probably not. So I doubt you care anyway. It's not like I'm gonna be somebody's favorite YouTuber or famous or anything like that. It's just a hobby. And other projects. So I've recently started an Instagram. I'll probably put that down below, and a blog about food and poetry. And well, the blog's about food, and then the Instagram's probably gonna be about like poetry and art and some other hobbies like photography too. Uh, it's not to like again, it's just a place to share what the things I like. All right then. So today's topic is Joe Louis versus Max Schmeling. This was around like pre World War II, where the Great Depression was happening, and there was also like uh, high tensions between the U.S. and Germany. So a lot of things were being turned into propaganda, which I'll explain later. So Joe Louis was known as the Brown Bomber. He lived in Michigan, and his record was 24-0, which means 24 wins and 0 losses. So he was riding high, and he was getting a little bit cocky. You know what I mean? And he was going up against Max Schmeling, who was a little bit older. Joe was Louis was a little bit younger, so he was a lot more cocky, and he, you know, was riding off the youthful wave. Well, Max Schmeling, on the other hand, Max Schmeling, on the other hand, was older and he had a lot more experience. And he was known as the Black Houlihan of the Rhine. Sorry if I mispronounced that. He had a record of 48 wins, 7 ties, and 4 losses. Max Schmeling was the former heavyweight champ. He, after a controversial loss to Jack Sharkey, I don't. Maybe that's a video for another time. Maybe if I get to that. And he was considered not as a very serious threat to Lewis because Lewis was running a high, and he has gone his entire career so far without losing. So that was what's happening. So he wasn't considered a serious threat. So Lewis kind of blew off his training a little bit. He explored golf, which became a life passion for him, and woman too. So good for him. While on the other hand, Jake. I keep saying the wrong person. So Schmeling knew that this was a very important match for him, so he took a lot of time understanding and looking through Lewis's catalog and analyzing him and training against his specific style of fighting, so that way he'd be prepared. Not to mention one more thing. This becomes a little bit racially charged later because we have an African American going up against a German which didn't have a good reputation about this point because of the Nazi regime and whatever, right? But so a lot of people assumed during the time that Schmeling was actually like a Nazi and was promoted because he was a very proud German. But as it turns out, he actually had a manager called Joe Jacobs, and he was Jewish. And there's some controversy with that later, but we'll get to it. Okay, anyway, so for their first fight, it was pretty famous. It had a lot of people going there. It got a lot of money. Not as much as the second fight, but Anyway, so he was pretty cocky at the beginning, and he didn't really think that anything would happen to him. But it turns out that Schmeling was very Schmeling came in with, determination to get this done and be able to win the fight, and Lewis came in very cocky. He didn't think that Schmeling was a very serious threat until he got wailed on by him and got a pretty serious injury in his eye, which left him not able to fight very well, and that led him to getting his first knockout in his career, and the only other one he would ever get in his career is 15 years later by a dude named Rocky Marciano. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong. Uh, and people were very devastated because the African American who was representing the USA for the first time ever, an African American was representing the U.S. got beaten by the German who was supposedly a Nazi, and again he wasn't. And Langston Hughes, a poet of the time from the Harlem movement, said, "I walked down 7th Avenue and saw grown men weeping like children, and women sitting in the curbs with their heads in their hands. All across the country that night, when the news came that Joe was knocked out, people cried." But in Germany, however, it was very famous. The fight was announced everywhere, it was broadcasted everywhere, and it was very public, and it was like a huge German victory. Hitler even sent to Schmeling's wife a flowers and a message saying, "For the wonderful victory of your husband, our greatest German boxer, I must congratulate you with all my heart." Anyway, so later on after the fight, both Schmeling and Lewis continue fighting, and but Lewis still won other fights, and he was very determined to be a better fighter. But he said to like some news broadcaster, reporter, or whatever, that he didn't consider himself the heavyweight champion until he went back and defeated Schmeling. So it was like very anticipated their rematch. Uh, And because, like the tension and the Great Depression and all that, Schmeling and his victory became targets for propaganda, where he was heavily promoted in Germany, used to call the Americans dumb idiots that can never be the true Aryan German, whatever. And he didn't like that. Schmeling did not like that because he was very supportive of the Jewish people, and he didn't want to be a super soldier in the eyes of the Germans. He told a German reporter, "I am a fighter, not a politician. I am no Superman in any way." And it was very controversial at the time because he kept his Jewish manager despite all the backlash that he got from his German supporters. Despite this, though, and how much he was like pushing against like the Germans, that he was not to be like a sport of propaganda, he still the Americans still hated him. Whenever he was at his hotel, he would get picketed by Americans outside. He received so much hate mail, and when he was entering into any ring, they would like throw cigarettes, butts, and other things at him. So that wasn't fun. Later on, it was just like training for the rematch because that was on, and President Franklin D. Roosevelt of the time visited Lewis and told him, "Joe, we need muscles like yours to beat Germany." Fucking insane. Man's got invited by the president. No, he didn't get invited by the president. The president went to him. That's pretty cool. Anyway, oh yeah, by the way, he gave up golf and woman. I know, it's such a hard sacrifice for the training for the rematch. And then he went to go fight Lewis. Before the fight, he said to a reporter, "Yeah, I'm scared. I might kill Schmeling." So you can see that cockiness coming back. In the rematch, I do have the solid numbers for how crazy this one was. The rematch costs were $1,015,012, which is equivalent to $19.5 million in 2021, and because radios were a thing around this time, 70 million people were listening in. That's a lot of people, especially for the time. That's like a lot of people. So Schmeling decided that Lewis probably wouldn't try anything new, or that he just thought he wouldn't be a major threat considering last time. So he just came in with the same old technique and didn't really do anything different. However, Lewis was very prepared, and he was trying to get an early KO in the fight, so he attacked with power and speed, which was really effective against Schmeling. And he managed to get a technical knockout in the 2 minutes and 4 seconds into the first round. Okay, so the statistics of the fight were that Lewis threw 41 punches, 31 of which hit solidly, while Schmeling was only able to hit two punches. That's not good for him. Uh, after the fight, Schmeling had to be admitted to the Polyclinic Hospital for 10 days, and he had a cracked vertebrae. That's pretty bad. That's not a good injury. And some poets said around the time, champion of the world, a black boy, some black mother's son. He was the strongest man in the world. People drank Coca Cola like ambrosia and ate candy bars like Christmas. Uh, People who were like against like African Americans of the time, basically racist and all that, were trying to spin it to where this was like this act of violence was the blacks returning to their most primitive state and only able to like fight things because they wanted to discredit him and his achievements. But it didn't really work too well because a black American fought against a German and won, and that was a huge thing for the time. That U.S. representation. After the fight, Germany didn't really support Schmeling as a national hero anymore, and they stopped using him in propaganda. So that's good, I guess. And later on, Schmeling returned home, and he ended up helping out some Jewish people. And in retaliation, the German government, or more specifically Hitler, drafted him into the war, in which I mean, he survived, and then he came back to try and restart his career in boxing. However, that became unsuccessful, and he ended up retiring just a few years later. Lewis, on the other hand, became a national hero and was considered the first true African American national hero. Too bad for the guys before him. During that time, segregation was still like a huge thing in the military, and Africans were opposed to joining the war effort because of that. But Lewis said, "There are a lot of things wrong with America, but Hitler ain't gonna fix them." So he ended up going to war or whatever. He didn't actually fight anybody. He was more of like a motivational speaker, and he gave soldiers like motivational speeches and taught them about boxing and stuff. So that way they could like keep motivation. Next. He remained a heavyweight champion until 1949. In his late life, when he was more elderly and out of boxing, well, I shouldn't say elderly, out of his prime, when he was like middle aged, he started running out of money, and he became addicted to drugs and women. So that's good for him. Uh, Despite everything that happened, Schmeling and Lewis actually became really good friends after the rematch, and Lewis and Schmeling even spotted Lewis money sometimes. And after Lewis died, because Joe Lewis died first, Schmeling paid for like for half the funeral, so that was nice. And they're actually both members of the International Boxing Hall of Fame, so good for those two guys. I just thought it was interesting that that Schmeling got a lot of crap for being a German of the time and supposedly a Nazi in the eyes of the Americans, but he wasn't, and it was actually a huge supporter of the Jewish people, and that he got a lot of bad rep because of that. By the way, this isn't like, super factual. This is just me basically reading off a Wikipedia article, so there's probably wrong information in here somewhere. This is just like a general summary. I'll probably cut this down a lot more, so that way it's a bit shorter. So that's about it. Have a nice day.